please welcome my panel. We've got, on the far right here, Will Dry, co-founder of Our Future, Our Choice. Tom Brake, Lib Dem Brexit spokesman. He made it clear that the Lib Dems are not pro-Brexit. Madeleina Kay, who has the enviable title of European Person of the Year.
Young European.
European Young Person of the Year, even more enviable. And Femi, who we've already seen, who's also the co-founder of Our Future, Our Choice. We're going to keep this short and sweet so that we can all celebrate and go to the pub for a drink or go off and have our evenings. But I think it's really important to reflect on everything we've heard today. There have been so many big ideas discussed and debated, and lots of practical, technocratic suggestions. But I want to use this last conversation to lift us to what's possible beyond this narrow Brexit moment. Because if Brexit has exposed one thing, it's exposed so many of the weaknesses of our institutions. My colleague Adam Ramsey wrote a brilliant piece a while back with the title, Brexit is showing the urban middle class the real Britain, and then the subheading was, and they don't like it. I dislike the moniker metropolitan elite, etc., but I think that Brexit has exposed to many people who expect the system to work, expect the rule of law to be upheld by our regulators, by the police, by politicians. People have been surprised to understand that actually that's not the way Britain works. And actually there are marginalised groups in Britain who've always understood that. So whatever happens in this narrow political moment, whatever happens next week, whatever happens in the coming months, however this Brexit drama unfolds, we really need to be thinking about what kind of politics better serves democracy and better serves the people of this country, what kind of new politics is possible. So that's what this panel is going to be about. And I'd like to invite Tom to talk a little bit about the political changes and reforms that you think are needed and that Brexit has exposed the need for.
Okay, well thank you. And can I first of all congratulate everyone who arrived here this morning and is still here. That's
yes.
Some sessions and session in endurance that you've got. So first of all, I think some of the reforms are well known because these are reforms that people have been pushing for a very long time. It's reforms such as proportional representation for our voting system. It's reforms such as reform of the House of Lords to have an elected chamber. It's devolution, making sure that more of the power that is currently centralised very heavily in Whitehall is distributed around the country, because there is strong evidence that people feel that local politicians are more accountable than perhaps politicians in Westminster. So I think all of those are things that we know about and have needed to be acted on for many years. The difficulty, as people will know, is that parties, the Lib Dems, we've consistently advocated proportional representation. We haven't changed our position. But clearly when parties get into power with a very large majority, suddenly the attraction of proportional representation seems to disappear. So we've got to try to find a way of locking parties into that survives an election where they get elected with a large majority. One other thing that has come out of what has happened in the last week or so is that we are in a very strange position as a democracy where when a majority of members of parliament want something to happen, it is quite difficult for us to make it happen when the government don't want it to happen. And one of the ways perhaps of addressing that is this idea that's been mooted in the past of a House Business or Business Committee, a House Business Committee, and that is one where rather than the government deciding what business is going to be transacted when in Parliament, actually there is a cross-party group of MPs who are able to do that. So we wouldn't get into a position where if Parliament wants to have a debate and a vote, if Parliament wants legislation to come forward, that can be blocked by the government. The only difficulty is that clearly doesn't work in all circumstances because, of course, the Scottish Parliament have something very similar, which worked quite well in terms of having a cross-party group deciding what business in the Scottish Parliament was until the SNP got an overall majority. And then, of course, that went out the window because the House Business Committee had a representation that was majority SNP, and therefore the cross-party aspect of it disappeared. So you've got to find ways of making it work. So I think those are certainly some things that we know need to happen. And one very concrete thing that what's happened in the last week or so has highlighted needs to happen in terms of reforms in Parliament.
Thank you. Madeleina, of course, politics doesn't just happen in Westminster. So tell me what changes you want to see that would help broaden the conversation and engage more people in politics.
Well, I think there's two main things that sort of led to the Brexit vote and the apathy in the UK. And I think the first one is a failure of our education system. And I think the second one is a failure of our media. Now, the first one, the education. In our schools, we're not taught the basics about even UK politics, never mind EU politics. And if you educate young people about why it's important to be involved in the political debate, then you're creating an investment in their, for their whole lifetimes in participating in democracy and caring about the issues that we should all care about, because we should all care about our social care system and our society as a whole. And I really think that we need, after this whole Brexit mess is sorted out, we need to start changing how young people are educated in schools, so that they understand what the EU has actually done to benefit their lives and to benefit our country. I think there's a lot of young people that don't care about Brexit enough to participate in our campaign, because they don't realise what is at stake. But outside of schools and educating young people, I think the media as a whole has got a bigger responsibility to communicate what's going on in just really simple, basic ways, so that people have the knowledge to make opinions. So when they're asked to vote, they can make informed decisions and not decisions that have been biased and influenced by rhetoric and slogans and propaganda. People need to be able to identify propaganda for what it is and to call it out and to make informed decisions. And just an anecdote over Christmas was I was talking to my friend who's a medical student, and she said to me, "I'm sick of hearing about the Irish backstop. I don't know what it is, but every person has been interviewed for their opinion on it, and I'm sick of hearing about it." When I was in Ireland, I saw a programme on the TV, and it was a children's programme. It was like a newsround equivalent, and they just very simply explained what the Irish backstop was, the problems with the Irish border, why Theresa May's deal was a disaster. And that made me understand everything that was going on in UK politics a lot more. I think we just need more simple factual information. And finally, I think we need to broaden the dialogue, because I think you see the same faces, the same kind of demographic of person on the TV and the media all the time. And people are... Sorry, Tom. And I really think we need to diversify the debate to give more people a broader range of voices and also a broader means of communicating. It's we campaign a lot on Twitter and Facebook, but so many of my friends don't even use Twitter and Facebook. What other channels do we have for reaching these people? And can we do it through more creative means as well, to make it more fun, to make it more engaging, make it more memorable, and make emotive arguments that touch people and make them care about the same issues that we're talking about?
Thank you. Femi, it's about money too, isn't it?
Well, let's say you're 55 You live in a town in the northeast or Wales, let's say Sunderland or something like that, and you've seen Thatcher pretty much asset strip your entire region. You've seen no real investment in your area. You've seen factories close, the shipyards close. Your dad might have lost a job when you were 15. And you've seen London have a thriving tube system. You've seen investment pouring into there. You've seen all the research, all the top universities, all there in the south. And you've seen that no matter which way you vote, nothing ever changes in your area. The options, the opportunities that you have in Hull or Swansea or Sunderland are not the same as the opportunities that exist to people who live in Greater London. And you've seen that for your entire life. And no matter which way you voted, nothing got better. So here comes along Brexit. They've said that there's nothing in your area. We send money to the EU, so let's have that money sent to you. It can go make your life better. Which way are you going to vote? You've seen your entire region was asset stripped by Margaret Thatcher, and here comes another Tory, David Cameron, telling you to vote to remain. Which way are you going to vote? So regional inequality is, for me, one of the biggest reasons behind the Brexit vote. Because people were tired of the votes meaning nothing, and that lends to the proportional representation thing. The irony being, of course, that we have first past the post, which means that many votes here simply don't count. I mean, I'm from Sajid Javid's constituency. My vote has never counted. And the irony is, the EU Parliament has proportional representation, which means that they have an even split of parties. I mean, if you take, for example, the Greens, they have a similar degree of support in the EU as they have here. They have 56 MEPs. We have, a force though she is, Caroline Lucas. Not fair. In fact, your views are more likely to be heard in the European Parliament, to make a difference in the European Parliament, than in the UK Parliament. And yet we voted for Brexit because we weren't being heard. So people in the areas that voted for Brexit, many of them feel that they have nothing to lose. So simply saying job losses, blah, 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 economic damage, that's not going to be enough. The point that we need to make is Project Hope. We recognize that the system was broken. We recognize that we've had an unfair system for the past 40 years. We know that if we're going to move forward as a country, we have to create a degree of balance. We have to invest in those areas that have been left behind, because otherwise we're going to end up right back here. If we stop Brexit and all we get is a bunch of Remainers saying, there we go, we won, status quo, let's keep going, we're screwed. The country is screwed. The only thing that can fix this country is if after Brexit, we say, all right, we recognize the problems, we're going to invest in those areas, we're going to invest in infrastructure in the north, we're going to give tax incentives to businesses that employ in those regions, we're going to improve the transport infrastructure so that, for example, if you want to go from Swansea to Bangor in the north of Wales, you don't have to go via Shrewsbury. That's literally what Google Maps says you have to do if you want to use the train. That is the sort of problem. I mean, HS2, good idea, but it's still London-centric. It still says everybody needs London. What about creating a thriving northern powerhouse by having an interconnected transport system so that the northern cities were connected to each other to create a thriving, independent northern economy? Because like I said, if Brexit stops and nothing changes, the anger will be like nothing we've ever seen. Now that's what we need to fix.
It feels like it starts there, really, doesn't it? It's about decentralization of funding, and the rest flows from it, because then you have the energy for and the resourcing for the rest of it.
Precisely. If all the resources that have been put into Brexit right now have been put into fixing the reasons why people voted for Brexit, I mean, right. Right now, the government has 7,000 civil servants working on Brexit. They've budgeted for 9,000 more, 300 to deal with border issues, not doctors, nurses, or teachers, civil servants to carry out a project that their own civil servants say harms the country. I feel like they could have been used better.
Somebody sitting in the audience suggested a slogan for today or for the Remain or People's Vote cause, and it was tough on Brexit, tough on the causes of Brexit. Will, assuming that resourcing and that decentralising and that shift in power, which I think has to be central to this, how do we get more people involved? How do you hear more voices in politics? How do we just widen the frame and become more inclusive in our political conversation?
Jesus. I think that, I'll talk about young people because that's the area I focus most on, although I think there's lots to be said for making sure that, as Femi said, the regions that are currently ignored by Westminster get more involved in the political debate. But with young people, I think there's advantages and disadvantages of making young people your message carrier for a referendum. An advantage is that they're not very toxic. People intuitively recognize that it's their future. A disadvantage might be that people might feel quite legitimately patronized by, a 28-year-old guy, even as eloquent as you are, or as eloquent as you are, Madeleina, because they might say that you don't have the same life experience as me. What do you know? You've never paid taxes, etc. So there's pros and cons. But I do think that during the next campaign, an absolute focus has to be involving young people more, because there's huge relative gains to be made given the lack of turnout compared to other demographics with young people. So, for example, in the 2016 referendum, 64% of young people turned out. That was actually quite high. That's more than 2017. They said there was a great youth quake in 2017. Less people turned out than in the EU referendum. But I think we can still get that higher. I was really interested to hear Andrew Lord Adonis come on before and talk about how you might be able to fix youth participation in politics. I think for his ideas with regard to votes at 16 and compulsory votes for 16 to 21-year-olds would go a long way, because they would get turnout to 90-95%, which would add millions of young voices and give young people real power in democracy that we don't currently have. I think that even if the government aren't going to be that radical, there's plenty of other things they can do. It's absolutely inexcusable that schools and universities do not have a legal responsibility to register their students and pupils that they're responsible for. Why is that not happening? In 2015, the latest stat showed that 35% of 18 to 19-year-olds were not even on the electoral register. How are young people meant to be involved in democracy if over a third don't even allow themselves to vote? I think that's a disgrace, personally.
Thank you. Okay, we have a few moments for questions. Please keep them brief. And I'm going to look around the room. There's a guy at the back with his hand up with a piece of white paper. Do we have any women asking to speak? Yes, the lady there, waving her piece of paper. And
there's a lady in green there that's waving her hand.
Lady in green. Lady in green. There we are. 3 questions, and they have to be questions. Hillary.
First of all, can I just say, you 3, Will, Madeleina, and Femi, you're amazing. Thank you for the work you do. And Tom as well, but they've given up their lives, whatever they are, for the moment to do this. But my question is, I'm really worried that we may get another politics, but it's not the one we want. There was an article in The Guardian, I think yesterday, about a guy originally from Serbia who has moved his life and his business to Switzerland. And partly because of what's happening to his business, but also the atmosphere in this country. And he said, I can't remember his exact words, but he basically said, this is like Serbia was in 1988. Oof. And 4 years later in Bosnia, we know what happened. So what can we do about that?
Thank you. Over there.
I'm speaking from very total ignorance about the whole scheduling of this campaign, and how long we think it'll take, and when it's going to start, or has it already started. And I just would like to be filled in a little bit by the campaign organization, because you've got a very big campaign going. I'm all for it, but it's got to be funded, and it's got to be properly organized, hasn't it? Perhaps it is. I just don't know. I'd like some answers.
It is.
Okay, so my question builds on what Remy said and also what Anthony Barnett said earlier about economic democracy. And it's really, how would you suggest rooting another politics in another economics? That it's, in a way, economic power that has overridden democratic power that underlies that sense of powerlessness that led people to vote for Brexit. And so surely we've got to think, even now, what can we do in building the Remain campaign to build on all the kind of initiatives that are taking place and are being supported by Labour. It's maybe a point where we can converge with Labour around local economic initiatives, around democratising the public industries. How can we root a new politics now, and the Remain campaign, in a new economics, an economics of control, take back the idea of control for our sort of democracy?
Thank you. I'll let you all answer any and all of those questions. Do you want to go first, Femi?
Well, just in relation to the notion of a new, scarier type of politics emerging, I think you're referring to the rise of populism and the far right. Well, as I was mentioning in relation to regional inequality, and I can credit my friend Stephen France from Sunderland for this insight. When I went to Sunderland, he explained to me, the reason why the EDL grows in places like that is because they tap into the existing frustration in those areas with this political system that doesn't work for people in those areas, and they point the finger at migrants, minorities, the EU. They use people who are already frustrated in order to create a justification for their narrative. Now, if we fix the problems, if we fix the root cause, the reason why they're originally frustrated, then there'll be less for the far right to actually grab onto. In fact, one of the reasons why, and my mum is not a fan of this, I went to a Tommy Robinson rally recently, is because I wanted to get them on camera saying that they know Brexit will make us poorer. Because they claim to represent the working class, but what they're doing, I've said before, Brexit is a victory for the far right and a knife in the back of the working class. Because that's, if you make them poor, that's what you're doing. So I think, yeah, the way we address that is by fixing the root causes.
Did you get them on camera?
Yes. Tommy Robinson's right-hand man saying that he knows that Brexit will make us poorer, yeah.
You can tweet that afterwards. Madeleina.
I think it's really important at this point for our country as a whole that we start having constructive dialogue to move forwards. I think one of the great tragedies of Brexit and one of the stupidities of holding a binary referendum on Brexit was that it has split us to two sides of a completely unnecessary divide that didn't need to be there. And that actually, when you look at people's positions, it's so much more complicated than that. And, I was stood outside Westminster on Wednesday, and an Aliva was shouting, "Oh, all these Remainers here are Corbynites." And I was like, "No, I don't like Jeremy Corbyn." And he was like, "Oh, well, we agree on that then." It's about finding the common ground. I think I was actually caught on the BBC camera saying "sod off, Jezza," but I mean, we need to reach out to people that don't share all the same opinions with us, and to learn to listen to their arguments, to listen to the causes of what's led them to their opinions, and so that we can then try to move forwards to find compromises and constructive ways forward. Because at the moment, you've got Remainers and Leavers on either side just hurling abuse at each other, disputing each other's facts, and that's what's causing the division in the UK. We are a disunited kingdom, and it's really tragic. It's really terrible, you know, as a young person to be looking at the political debate in this country and thinking, what has it come to? It's not something I want to be part of, but it's something that we have to change. We've got to be an example to the rest of the world, and not to look like the mess that we currently look like.
We currently are.
Well, first of all, in answer to the question, is there a campaign? Is it underway yet? Well, clearly it is, and this is very much what part of what today is about. However, for there to be a genuine campaign, and I don't want to be party political, but following the comments Madeleina made, I'm going to be, unless Jeremy Corbyn gets on board for a people's vote, there will be no people's vote campaign. Full stop. It cannot happen without him, because he will bring with him the other people in the shadow cabinet, or some of them who are reluctant. Without him, it is not going to deliver the goods, frankly. In relation to the point about economics, actually, I think often this is actually about decisions that previous governments have taken. So if you map the areas that voted Brexit against the areas that had coal mining communities that collapsed after the coal mining industry was dismantled, there's a very, very clear correlation. And the investment did not, unfortunately, go into those areas. So sometimes it's about decisions that governments, past governments have taken. But I agree that clearly there are sometimes factors outside the UK government, so in terms of globalization and the powers that very large global companies have now, perhaps not to pay their taxes and so on. I think we have such a strong case to make that actually it's membership of the European Union that helps us tackle those issues, because the EU is taking the lead on those issues. So sometimes it's governments that have failed, but we need to be able to tackle these things collectively, and doing that through the European Union is our best bet at the moment.
On the Serbia question, yeah, it's a bit of a depressing thought. I think that the big thing that needs to happen is how do people interpret the result? So, for example, in the 2016 referendum, politicians interpreted the result. Theresa May said that if you're a citizen of the world, you're a citizen of nowhere. She thought it was all about immigration, and that we had to leave the customs union, we have to leave the single market. She did not seek at all to unite the divide that the referendum had provoked. And I think that if we win a referendum this year, Femi's absolutely right in his first answer. We have to, people voted for more control in 2016. That desire has not gone away. We have to find a domestic method to deliver more control, and actually also ask the European Union for better ways to give the British people more control. On the question on has the campaign started, I think it absolutely has. I think each day now is relatively more important than each day was in June 2016. We are literally deciding the future of our country in the next month, and hopefully the next 6 months. And on the last question on economic power or democratic power, I think that I disagree with you, because I think that, but I think that people felt like economic power was more powerful than democratic power. But I think in reality, what 2016, both in America and also in the UK, showed that democratic power will always be more powerful than economic power. Because, why on earth would people, why would Earth would have won a referendum if economic power was more important when you had the CBI, the Bank of England, every single economist in the country telling people to vote to remain?
But I think the point, this is, I know it was made everyone very angry, but when Michael Gove said, well, people had enough of experts, I think the point is that people feel that they wouldn't express it this way, but they want economic power that they don't currently feel that they have. And so, these so-called elites telling them, oh, well, you're not going to have any more economic power, or, the economy is going to go down the tube, when they don't really feel like they've got much to lose. I think Hillary's point stands as far as that goes. If you feel like you have economic power, if you feel like you have an economic agency, then this situation maybe wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. And I think we have to find domestic solutions to give people real economic power and not dismiss their desire for it at all. But let's remember, with a people's vote, we're a movement for a people's vote. We have to absolutely believe in democratic power, or we don't really have a hope in hell. Currently, the CBI are against us. All the big businesses are against us. The Treasury is against us. Let's hope democratic power will win.
I'm going to say one final thing, which is that in the last panel, there were 3 slogans that the Leave campaign clearly have. Leave means leave. What were the other 2?
Take back control.
Take back control and... Okay, we're never going to win this if we don't have better slogans than them. And what on earth have we been doing all this time? Seriously. Can anyone come up with a really good slogan? So I think tough on Brexit, tough on the cause of Brexit is excellent. Anyone want to shout at any others? Leave it out. Thank you all for coming today. It's been gone.
The one that I always say is back Britain, not Brexit.
Back Britain, not Brexit. Okay, so let's keep this conversation
we need
going
to be
on
patriotic.
Twitter. Let's keep this conversation going on social media. Let's keep arguing. Let's keep building and strengthening on each other's ideas, because I think that we've got some work to do here, guys. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you for this panel, and we're going to have a final word from Caroline Lucas.